Say goodbye to discomfort and hello to confidence. Dr. Rachel is your go-to expert for balancing your health with the pelvic floor challenges you might be having, from urinary incontinence to postpartum recovery. She's dedicated to helping you feel comfortable and empowered so you can live life worry-free. We have a conversation about all the things you might not be ready to talk about. So let's dive in. In our most sleep-deprived moments, our children will teach us exactly what we need in order to learn and grow into who we were created to be. These are the loving lessons we will learn whether we were wanting to or not. I'm Irene Gouge, your sleep coach, and I'm on mission to educate parents on how to help their young children sleep. Welcome to the journey. Hello, and welcome to the Loving Lessons Learned podcast. I'm Irene, and I'm so excited to be here with Dr. Rachel, who is our special guest, who is here to help you with pee and poop, pleasure and pain, and pregnancy and postpartum. I loved when I heard that about her. And she helps her patients overcome bothersome symptoms such as urinary incontinence, hip, lower back, pelvic pain, pelvic organ prolapse, and other common issues that no one's really talking about. And her goal is to help make every patient comfortable and hopeful that they can live life without worrying about their pelvic floor. Thanks, Dr. Rachel. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
This is so fun. I loved your pee, poop, pleasure, pain, pregnancy, and postpartum.
Thank you.
How did you even decide to get into this world of being trained as a pelvic physical therapist?
Yeah, so I have pelvic floor dysfunction myself. I am 35 right now, and this happened in my late teens and early 20s. So quite, it feels like a long time ago now. But I always joke that that was before the days that Instagram had really taken off. So we weren't talking about pelvic floor dysfunction the way that we are now because there wasn't really social media to have that platform to talk about it. So as you can imagine, as a, young woman, I felt so just isolated that I was suffering with both urinary incontinence during sneezing and then also like jumping, stuff like that. And then I also had debilitating pelvic pain and such to the point that I was unable to be intimate because it was just so painful. And so I was just in my head thinking, well, I guess there's something really wrong with my body. I'm really broken, and it was just really a dark time. And thank goodness I had a wonderful gynecologist who referred me to a pelvic floor physical therapist because they existed back then. They just weren't on social media, obviously. And, I always say the rest is history because number one, I resolved my symptoms. So that was life-changing in itself. But then also, I was already on the path to becoming a physical therapist. And I was like, wait, I can do this. This is amazing because I hadn't even heard of the specialty prior. But I saw that what a significant difference it made in my life. And I knew then that I wanted to do the same for other women. So that's kind of how I got into it.
I always love hearing the story because I think it's always interesting. Like none of us fall into these practices ever just on accidents. Like there's like a backstory to it. And so it's great to always hear what was going on, what was happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wonder if like when women become pregnant, I wonder if they even are thinking about their pelvic floors and maybe are not sure what they should do. And like, should they get started before pregnancy?
Mm-hmm.
During, after delivery, like, is there anything you would recommend for women working on during that pregnancy season that could help them stay healthy with their pelvic floor?
Yeah, and I think a lot of women are thinking about their pelvic floor nowadays because like I said, we've done a really good job of being present on social media and just kind of broadcasting this message to take care of your pelvic floor. So I do think a lot of it's on, a lot of pregnant women's minds, but it's just like you said, like I don't know what to do, when to get started. I'm not really having any symptoms. And I always say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Obviously, didn't make that up. It's a very well-known saying. But I always love, yeah, like you said, should they come before? Should they come during? The earlier you can get in and just have an assessment, the better it is, because that way, if you do have some, coordination deficits, or you're a little weaker, or just something's going on that might cause problems down the road, we can get a jump start on working on them. But that being said, it's never too late to come. So you can, I certainly see people coming in and they're about to give birth and they're in a lot of pain. And then, of course, it can be a harder situation because they've let it get to a point where it's severe. But that doesn't mean we can't help. So we can help then. But like I said, kind of the earlier the better, because that way we can nip any problems in the bud.
Now, you said something about coordination deficit. What do you mean by
Mhm.
what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes I always say
No, I mean,
in physical therapy speak. Yeah, so the pelvic floor, just like any other muscle, it needs to be strong, but it also needs to be coordinated. So, it would be the same as if my shoulder, I'm trying to show you, if I wanted to reach towards my face, but instead I reached over here, those require two different actions. And if I wasn't able to clearly delineate between those, I would have problems when I went to reach for a cup or something like that. So the same goes with the pelvic floor. So sometimes women are really strong, they're working out a lot, but their pelvic floors just have some trouble coordinating, so that when they go to sneeze, our pelvic floor should lift up and support our bladder and support us so that we don't leak. But for whatever reason, that's not happening. And so, that can cause some issues. And I can't tell you how many people come in here and they are very proactive, and they're like, I'm working out a lot and I'm really strong. I don't understand why this is happening. And that was me too, as a young woman. I felt like, I was pretty athletic and I worked out a lot. And so I was like, what's going on? But for me, it was mostly coordination, that my body just didn't know how to time things correctly for one reason or the other. So that hopefully that clarifies it.
yeah. No, I
Yeah.
mean, it makes me just think about like sometimes we're just doing things and we don't realize why we're doing it,
Yeah.
and understanding, hey, where is this pain or problem coming from, and sometimes we don't realize, like, I think the handicaps we kind of create along the way. And like, I didn't even know this was a thing. And you're right, like social media has really brought it to
Yeah.
light.
Yeah.
And now, as a doula and sleep coach, I'm like, we talk about
Yeah.
pelvic floors all the time. It's
Yeah.
a part of the journey. It's going to help us be strong mamas.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's how the body's designed, way back when we were running away from a tiger, if your ankle hurt, like you had to do whatever you had to do to get away from
Mhm.
them. And so thank goodness we're designed like that, but it didn't set us up for long-term health. And so, I never want anybody to feel badly that they've developed some compensations over
Mhm.
the way, because that's how we're made. But it's just, now that we're living a little longer, we're more aware of our health. We want to fix those issues if we can.
Yeah. I'm wondering, I'm kind of curious about like your story, and
Mhm.
maybe how does it relate at all any to potty training?
Interesting that you say that. So I am currently not trained in pediatric pelvic floor therapy. However, there is such a thing. And I don't know if my specific story was related to potty training, but I do have many patients who come in to my office and they say, I could never use the bathroom in public, or I've always had a nervous bladder, or things like that. So I definitely think there might have been there likely is a lot of the times laying a foundation in childhood that then carries over into later adulthood. And so certainly if you do notice your child having any of those like even bedwetting, or just having, a lot of times it's like a sensory thing where children don't want to be on the potty and whatnot. So if you do notice that, again, prevention is always better than treatment. So it's like, yeah, let's get them in for an assessment, not with me, but I can direct you to one of my wonderful colleagues who treats pediatrics, because I bet there's a lot that they could work on. because yeah, we just carry these patterns into adulthood.
Yeah, because as you were sharing your story, and then I was thinking about the pee and poop, like sometimes like I know that bedwetting can be related also to constipation. And so you're helping the whole like digestion and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and constipation is actually a big factor in many conditions that I treat in adults. So we always joke constipated until proven innocent or something like that, because constipation is a big factor in a lot of issues, both in children and adults.
Yeah, because sometimes people don't even know like the symptoms. Like they're like, no, I'm having a regular bowel movement, but they could still be potentially constipated.
Perhaps, we would like to look at the consistency of the bowels. So even if they say they're going regularly, but it's either watery or very hard, that might indicate a problem. Or what is regular to each person. Somebody says like, yeah, I go once a week, that's fine. But the lower end we like to see is 3 times a week. So it's like, oh, maybe you actually have a little bit more that you could go. So a lot of things like that.
All the things that we can talk about. I'm so grateful that we can have these hard
I
conversations here. I
know.
love it. Right? Where else can you go and just talk about all the things? So, Dr. Rachel, I'm wondering like one of the things I've heard before is like, do Kegels. Like,
Yeah.
who should be doing Kegels, and are there better pelvic floor exercises besides Kegels?
Yeah, it's interesting, Irene, because for many years, physicians would just say, do your Kegels and you'll be fine. But if it were as simple as that, my profession wouldn't exist. So there is a little bit more nuance to that. And then I feel like the pendulum actually swung too far, where because a lot of us pelvic floor therapists recognized that, just blindly doing Kegels is not optimal, then people said, okay, I shouldn't be doing Kegels at all. And they can certainly sometimes be helpful. So I think we need to find a middle ground. And so what I would say is if you are, a person who's not a pelvic floor therapist and can assess whether your pelvic floor is too weak, too tense, too anything going on there, I don't think you should necessarily just add Kegels willy-nilly. I think it's beneficial to get an assessment, because you can actually overdo it and make your pelvic floor muscles too tense. And so that's the key problem with just doing Kegels all the time, is that people end up in my office again and saying like, yeah, I do all my Kegels, but then they can't relax at all. So that would be the example of one of the coordination deficits that I have mentioned earlier, is if you're really, really just squeezing hard, but then you can't take a deep breath and let your pelvic floor go, then that can be a problem. So if you're unsure, again, get an assessment. There's also some at-home exercises that I could go into detail about for you to try to self-assess, to see if you should be doing Kegels. But I would say just, if you're not sure, just hold off for now.
Is that do you have a handout or a freebie that like
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's what I detail. And basically all it is a deep breath. And I know, that we talk about deep breathing for stress. I'm sure you talk about it in your work a
yeah,
lot. Um, but so in taking a deep breath, I know all of us think about our belly, and that's wonderful, but we also want to kind of touch base with our pelvic floor and think, okay, what's going on down there? And in a perfect world, just like our belly, our pelvic floor would expand as we take a big inhale, and then it would kind of recoil just like the belly. Again, imagine a belly going up and down. Same thing with the pelvic floor. It should kind of, move a little bit on your deep breaths. And so if you are a person who tries to take a deep breath and you're just like nothing's happening down there, then you could be too tense. And so that would be a scenario where I would say don't just add a Kegel until we can fully
understand the
relax.
whole situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, I'll share a link down in our show notes to that so people can grab
Yeah.
the pelvic floor exercises and not just do Kegels out there.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's
I'm
awesome.
wondering if there are any exercises, because we're talking about like some movement and all things that maybe are off limits during pregnancy. I think that there's like
Oh,
some mixed messages
yeah.
for parents, soon to
Yeah.
be parents, and then when can they get started with activity level as well?
Yeah, and that's so valid because, especially first timers, but even, people who into their second, third pregnancy, you do want to take a little extra caution. And so I can understand where you're a little bit nervous and it's like, oh, should I be doing this or should I be not? Should I be resting, and what we found is that in a healthy pregnancy, it's very beneficial to continue a movement routine. Now, there are some conditions that your doctor will put you on bed rest. So you always want to be in communication with your physician, but those are more rare. And so for the general, for most people, you would be safe to move during pregnancy. Um, and it's all dependent on what you were doing pre-pregnancy. So if I know a lot of women are very, very active and then they become pregnant and then they're like, okay, what should I be doing? And it is safe to continue a high level of activity if your body's used to that. Now, if you weren't, if you were a couch, just not very active, and then you became pregnant and you said, oh, I've heard exercise is healthy, I'm going to train for a marathon. Maybe that's not the best time during your life to just undertake a big physical activity. So it's really dependent on the individual, but I would say just listen to your body and keep on doing what you're doing. And then also just you might have to make some modifications, and that's where either a pelvic floor physical therapist or a personal trainer who's very well versed in prenatal populations would be very helpful, because things like burpees you're likely not going to be doing, especially as your belly grows. You're going to have to modify, but there's plenty of women who are very active, very far into their pregnancy, and they're just fine. So I don't want anybody to be scared of movement, but just listen to your body, especially because also as your body changes, we know that first trimester a lot of women are very wiped out and then they feel guilty that they're not exercising. So it's like, look, your body's telling you it wants to rest, and then hopefully that passes and then you get back into your routine. Just take it day by day.
Yeah. So Rachel, I'm going to just confess 18 years ago, I was just about to give birth to my son, I was not feeling compelled to move my body. And I was just kind of eating
Yeah.
McDonald's quarter pounder with cheese. That was the craving. I was like, I just don't think this is good for me, but it was what worked at the time. And I just didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and clearly you had a healthy child and it's all good. So I feel like our society judges women and judges mothers so much. So
yeah,
although I do try to preach, stay active if you can, I also understand that, pregnancy is a small time in your life in the overall picture. So if you want to sit on the couch and eat quarter pounders, that's what your body's asking for. I'm here for it.
like what nutrients am I craving right now? Like surely they were not. But it's always interesting, like, right, that's where I was. I just didn't know. And now it's been an interesting journey as I've been learning. And then even later with my second son, like just recognizing like knowledge is power and not shaming ourselves for the choices that we
Yeah.
did make. I think that's also part of the parenting journey as
Yes.
well. So any mamas and dads listening out there, kind of being aware of that as
Yes.
you go through, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know.
100%. 100%.
And so, like, after you give birth, what is the recommendation to get back to exercise? Because I also find like there's some moms that I'm supporting, they're like, I'm ready to go, like, I'm ready to lose this. And then some are like, man, I think I'm good. And so I'd love to kind of hear.
Yeah. So it's very dependent on your labor and delivery experience. So we know that some people have much smoother experiences than others. And also the method of delivery, a C-section is a major surgery. So if you've had one, it is going to be a longer recovery process. So, the first thing I would always say is just getting in touch with your pelvic floor with that breathing exercise that's in that handout. But even if you don't download the handout, it's just basically just breathing and seeing, can I feel my belly? Can I feel my pelvic floor? And then gently contracting on your exhale. And again, see, so this would be where the Kegel comes in. Can I differentiate between contracting into a Kegel versus relaxing into a deep breath? Um, so I love that breath just to start, because we can be a little out of touch. Again, pregnancy is a big physical undertaking. We had this big belly, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And so that does, alter your brain a little bit, and you start to be a little bit out of touch with your abdomen and with your core. And so I think just first laying that foundation is great. But then I also think, walking and low impact exercises such as like body weight bridges, or even squats, to your chair. Squats up and down can be really beneficial. But again, it just all depends on how you're feeling. I've had mamas who are ready to go the first week, and I have to hold them back, and I have to say, okay, you're not ready to go
You're like,
back
not
to
just yet.
CrossFit yet. And then I've had women who unfortunately had just a pretty hard labor experience, and they just feel wiped out, and they just need a rest. And I think the hardest thing is to just listen to our bodies and not compare ourselves to others, especially this time of social media where you see the influencers and they're doing their gym workouts at 1 week postpartum, and they look really strong. And I sometimes that's not always real life. So I would just urge people just to check in with your body, and then go from there.
I love what you said, Rachel, about like listening to your body. I think that is like a skill
A
that we
hundred
all
percent.
can work on. Like I know myself included, like to learn to listen to like, what does my body need? What do I need right now? Like that has just been a journey that I've been unpacking and unfolding along the way. And then being able to then tune in to what my kids and others around me are also needing, and recognizing that. I think sometimes like we're just doing life, like because we're like our culture is so fast paced that we don't take time for like the healing process and
Yeah,
recovery.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are the most common issues that you see maybe come up during pregnancy or postpartum? Like what would be those red flags someone might, maybe pink flags, pink or red flags
Yeah.
that they might notice? They're like, huh, I don't know if I should really reach out to a professional.
Pain is certainly a big one, pelvic pain, low back pain, hip pain, because like I said, there are a lot of things that we can work on to resolve that. So, unfortunately, there's still a message in society that says like, oh, you're pregnant, just deal with it. But that's often not true. You can often make big changes in your pain with either tools or strategies or exercises. So if you are starting to have discomfort, certainly reach out, because we want you to be as comfortable as possible. And then in terms of pelvic floor specific, it would be more like that leaking, or like a heaviness sensation. Both of those can be a sign that something's not right in your pelvic floor, and we can work on that as well. And again, it's often normalized, like, oh yeah, you're leaking, but you got a baby on your bladder, which is true, that the baby is putting some pressure down there, but it's also true that, a lot of times we can resolve those symptoms. So, try not to resign yourself to these pelvic floor symptoms, because they are often very treatable.
Yeah. It's just interesting as you're saying some of these things, how many things of these, what people had said, practitioners had said, like, oh, it's normal. Like,
Yeah.
that's okay. I like sciatic nerve pain, like that,
Yeah.
like shooting down the leg kind of thing. Like, is that something you could have helped me with?
100%. Yeah. Okay. I keep saying 100%. Sorry. That's my catchphrase. 100%. But it's so true. Yes. I could have, I treat that a lot. So yes, I would have loved to seen you.
Yeah. I just, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things. Like, it's like, where do you go? And like, how come no one's telling us where to go sometimes? And I think we are getting better. I do think we're making progress, which is
Yes.
good.
And there are certainly, colleagues that I have, such as chiropractors, who also help with sciatic pain. So in a perfect world, you would have a team of providers on your prenatal team. But in the real world, you kind of choose the provider who you resonate with, who's closest to your home, who's most convenient, and just start there, and then see if it makes a difference, and go from there, because I think a lot of us are doing good work and can help. So we're all here to support you.
Yeah. Rachel, you bring up a good point. Like, how does someone choose a pelvic floor therapist? Because everybody kind of has their specialties. And like,
Yeah.
even me trying to refer somebody, I'm like, I do try to go by location sometimes. And
Yeah.
are there any things that you would share that might be helpful for someone to take into consideration?
So I would say if someone is having very pelvic floor specific issues, such as incontinence, like I mentioned, or pelvic floor pressure, or things like that, um, we really are the pelvic floor specialists. So I think that would be a great referral. But also, I think if you're not responding to traditional therapies, so I know a lot of my orthopedic colleagues treat low back pain, and oftentimes they treat it very well. But sometimes things like pelvic and low back pain can be actually stemming from the pelvic floor. So someone will go to a traditional therapy and not get better, and say, oh, I guess I'm just broken, that same kind of soundtrack that I had. And it's like, well, it's not that there was anything wrong with the therapy. It's just that it's stemming from your pelvic floor. So that might be a time when when you really want to speak to a specialist. So, again, there's a lot of us out here helping people live better lives, and I love all my colleagues. And so, if you do have low back pain, I love, chiropractor is certainly a good option as well, or, whoever. But if you're having pelvic floor specific issues, you want to see a pelvic floor specialist.
Great. And how can parents learn more about you and your services?
Yeah, probably on my website, which would be durhampelvicpt.com.
I'll
And then
share a link down below in the show notes to that.
perfect. And then also I am active on social media at just my name, at Rachel J Physical Therapy. And that's Instagram. So both of those places are where I try to talk about my services.
That's great. You give some really great tips on your socials. So everyone
Thank you.
hop
I
on and
try.
follow
Mhm.
Dr. Rachel. Um, what mistake do you think that women make when it comes to their pelvic floor after birth?
I think I think there's two sides of the spectrum. I think one is just trying to do everything immediately, just trying to get back to pre-pregnancy as soon as possible, and not giving themselves the time needed for healing. So I think that's probably one end of the spectrum. And then I think the other side would be people who kind of just don't do anything and are having symptoms or not feeling quite the same, but they're thinking, oh, it'll go away in time. And sometimes that's true, but oftentimes it's not. And so I think if we just kind of put our blinders on and ignore problems, that can be problematic as well. So I think, in a perfect world, we'd meet in the middle, and we'd be aware of our pelvic floor, we'd be working on issues, but we also wouldn't rush ourselves to be back to where we were prior to having a child.
Yeah. So it's interesting you talk about, like, just becoming aware of your pelvic floor. Sometimes coming in for that visit can be a little bit hard, but you also offer virtual services. So like, how does that work for families?
Yeah, virtual. So it's so funny because that obviously, like most of us during the pandemic, I had never, I had never offered virtual, but then during the pandemic, it's like everybody's virtual. And
Virtual.
that was interesting. And now most of my patients certainly take advantage of the in-person visits, but there are some people, especially in that new mom period, where it's like it's hard to get out of the house. And speaking to a specialist is going to be better than not. And oftentimes we can cover things, just like education on different different strategies that you can use, and I can go over exercises, and I can even talk you through a pelvic examining yourself. Certainly, it's not quite the same, but you can get a lot of valuable information if I'm right there with you talking you through it. So it's so much better than just not getting care at all. And it can be a really nice option because I can see then what's going on in your home. A lot of people are saying like, oh, at my desk, when I'm working, I'm getting a lot of back pain. And so I'll say, okay, show me your setup. And then I could nitpick, and say like, oh, well, maybe this isn't optimized for you. So there's definitely pros and cons.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. And I always think about like some of my families, I help them create routines with their little ones so they can practice their pelvic floor therapy
Yeah.
exercises, during that playtime with their kiddos, so it can
Yeah.
be a win-win. Everyone's doing a
Yeah,
little bit.
involving the kiddos in exercises is my favorite. So, and the kids like it too.
Yeah,
So,
like they don't even know, like, hey,
yeah.
looking at my pelvic floor, oh my
Yeah.
God, good job.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how we'll get ahead in the future.
Hmm.
Well, I think we could probably talk all day, but I want to wrap up with our top 5 loving lessons learned.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if you have a favorite product or service that you love. I always like to know people's favorite things.
So my favorite thing, I have it right here beside me, is what's called an SI belt.
Oh,
And so basically, if I stand up, and for those of you on listening, it's literally just like a belt, except made out of a bit of softer material, and you put it. Oh, you can't even see me, so that didn't work.
those who are watching might be able to see, but are you putting down below?
You put it down right at your hips, and then you just squeeze it tight and put it on. So I won't even fully put it on so I can kind of talk to you about it. But basically all it does is it provides you a little bit of support right there at the pelvis. And that can be really beneficial for women who are feeling a little less supported, whether it's because they just gave birth, or because they're a little weaker in their hips than optimal. So a lot of times it really makes a big difference in low back and SI pain. And so I always try it on with my patients, and if it's going to work for you, you'll know it right away. You'll be like, oh my gosh, this makes a huge difference. And I'll say, exactly, let's use it. So that's
Overuse it, I guess I'm wondering.
yeah, good question. You can, in that, if you're not also working on the root cause of why you're having the pain, I wouldn't recommend that, but it can certainly be a really good tool to just help us through a time period when you are having some pain. So
Yeah.
that way you can still, again, especially if you have multiples, it's like you can't just sit in bed and rest. You're cooking dinner, you're walking around. And so just using it to help you get through your day as you're addressing why you're having pain. And
Yeah.
it's similar to the belly bands during pregnancy, which can be really helpful as well.
Yeah. My families usually ask about that, and just trying to find that right product. And, I kind of share like if we can have a little bit of support, you know what I mean? And feel like
Yeah.
we're being hugged and loved on, like it helps us feel a little more
Yeah.
rested. And so I love that. That's a really great
Yeah.
tool to share.
I know people think I make commission off of it because I love it so much. And I'm like, I don't. I just love it so much.
That's how I feel about my UFOs. I'm like, I just love them. I need support
Yeah.
on my feet.
Yeah.
What is your best self-care tip?
So we've talked about it throughout this podcast, but really just listening to your body. So I think that mamas in particular are so good at ignoring their own needs and just taking, even setting a little reminder on your watch just every few hours, just to take a moment, take a breath, check in with your body. Because I think that, like I had said earlier, prevention is always going to be better than letting a problem spiral out of control. And I think a lot of times we just ignore our body until we have a significant issue. But have we just taken a little bit of time for ourselves to kind of check in and say like, oh, my back is feeling a little tight. Let me go do a quick stretch before it continues building. I think that can make a huge difference.
Now, is that something you do daily?
Yes, 100%. I try to
100%. I
walk the
love it.
walk and yeah, I mean, I certainly, like I said, the reason I'm in this field is because I had pelvic floor issues myself, and so from time to time I have back pain. I'm not perfect, and I try my best to listen to my body and employ the same tactics that I teach my patients to.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great wisdom to share because oftentimes, like, my old self would be like, once I do this, I'll be fixed. And then I
Yeah.
forget it's like a common thing we have to keep
Yeah.
practicing along the way.
Yeah.
What is something you never thought you might do or say?
So pelvic PTs say a lot of weird stuff. so, like backtracking to the Kegel, when I am teaching a Kegel, I say, suck up a milkshake with your vagina. So I probably didn't think I would say that. I
Okay,
also,
that's a good one.
yeah, talk about buttholes sometimes, just a lot of different things that, are totally normal in my world, but certainly never would have thought that I would have said.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Always good to know. And is there like one big takeaway? I think you probably already touched on it as we've been talking, but you really want parents to know and walk away with as we've been connecting today.
Yeah, just that, you don't have to live with pelvic floor symptoms just because you're a parent. I think that it has been very normalized and it's been like, oh, well, you had a baby. What else do you expect? But a lot of these issues are very, very treatable. And also, they're treatable even if you've had them for years. A lot of the times they can resolve just because you've kind of been stuck in, like we were talking about coordination before, you've been stuck in this loop where your body's not supporting you as best as it could. And we can break that loop many years down the road. So I don't want people to think, well, I'm, back to work. I'm no longer in that fresh postpartum state, but I'm still having this issue, but it's too late. It's certainly never too late to get help.
That's great. And then you are also a small business
Yeah.
owner. And so, what's one thing you've learned in your entrepreneurial journey?
Yes, I've been in business a little over a year, and it's just me, one woman show. And it's interesting because I feel so confident in my skills as a physical therapist, and why I opened this business. I know I can help people, but when you open a business, as I'm sure you well know, you have to be the admin, the website designer, the manager, kind of a ton of different roles that I didn't go to school for, and I'm not as confident in. So I think that really, really flustered me when I first got going, and I felt like I had to be perfect at everything. And, that's just not true. It's everybody's a beginner at some, I'm getting tongue tied now. Everybody is a beginner. And, the only way to get better is to practice. And also, it doesn't really matter, again, I'm not trying to be a fitness influencer. So if my post has 10 likes or two, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things as long as I'm helping people in my practice. I don't have to be the best at social media or at whatever else.
Yeah. I just love all that because, I think so many parents could relate to that too, because I think like we're new in the business of parenting, right? Like
Yes.
we're having to learn all these skills, like how do I take care of you and me
Yes.
and all the things. And
Yeah.
it's like, I think I'm a recovering perfectionist. And so having to like unlearn and, be like, okay, in this present moment, like that's all part of this beautiful journey.
Yeah.
So, well, Dr. Rachel, thank you so much for being here with me today. It's been so much fun connecting, and I'll have all those things down in the show notes for our guests
Thank
too.
you so much for having me. It has been really fun.
All right, take care. Thanks for tuning into today's show. You can see all of the details and show notes below. And as you go out into your day, I hope that you'll make it your mission to be calm, confident, and rested as you lead today. Sweet dreams.